Hello, I'm Robert McKay. You saw the channel, you saw that it's a thoroughly amateur production. Everything about those two title cards is the exact truth. And I don't know if y'all have noticed, probably not, the huge number of 57 subscribers. I know there are people who actually watch my videos, but I don't know how many of y'all pay attention to openings. I make it a point not to do it exactly the same way every time. I've got the page flipping, although I sometimes even vary that. But I try not to have the exact same opening spiel. Some people can do it well. Dave McKeegan sounds like it's fresh. Justin Peters does fit pretty good. But if you listen to 3 or 4 of their videos, you realize every single video begins verbatim with the same thing. And I don't like to do that. It's my personal preference. I like to begin differently every time. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, the cows were singing opera. Am I making sense? Because if I am, I can fix that. Tonight, we have a review. Well, you're not going to see that label real good. In fact, did I mention this is a thoroughly amateur production? I am recording or attempting to record with my phone propped up in front of me, and it just bloop, it flopped down. We'll try this again. Let me put my hand behind here. I'm not sure how good that's doing, but anyway, this is Oregon Spirit, and you can read the green letters just fine, I'm sure. Wheated rye. Now, if you're at all familiar with bourbon, you know that there's the traditional bourbon recipe, which uses rye as the secondary grain. And then there's wheated bourbon, which uses wheat as the secondary grain. And I have never been able to detect as great a difference between traditional and wheated bourbon as some people can. And yeah, I have a smudge on my glasses. The older they get, the more easily smudges appear. I wouldn't worry about it, except it's right where I'm looking. Okay, that smudge is gone. A more professional videoer would edit that out. A, I wouldn't know how to do it. B, I probably don't have the program on my computer to do it. And C, I don't want to do it. If I ever foul something up so bad that the video's unusable, I'll just re-record. Meanwhile, let's pour a glass, because while the glass is hiding my mouth, this is not going to be sipping and talking, although I've been babbling and blabbering and gabbling all along. This is going to be a review. That's about the level I want it at. And my Coke's over there. You can see as I turn just how low the level is in the bottle. I've had this since the 28th of April, so more or less 4 months. It's a wheated rye, as I was saying before the smudge interfered. And this is the only wheated rye I've ever heard of. As a general rule, in fact, let me back up a tad. by law, to have the name rye whiskey, it has to be at least 51% rye. Now, if I ever looked up, well, I know I looked up the mash bill on this because I did a review on Distiller, but I don't look that up for these video reviews, and I don't know what the mash bill is on this, but I know it's at least 51% rye. The majority grain, the dominant grain in rye whiskey has to be rye. But as a general rule, rye has just that and sprouted barley. And there are some recipes, MGP is famous for using 95% rye and 5% barley, just enough barley to provide the enzymes to help the yeast work. This is a wheated rye. Going off not memory but supposition, as I said, I don't remember the mash bill for this. I would expect that it's 60-70% rye maybe. Then there's maybe 25% wheat. My brain's fried. And that's not an unusual situation. And then the rest barley. But at any rate, this has wheat as a secondary grain. And this is the only wheated rye I've ever heard of. And it's a special release by Oregon Spirit just for Total Wine. And while there really is an Oregon Spirit distillery in Bend, Oregon, as far as I know, that all they make is whiskey for Total Wine. I've never seen or heard of their stuff any other where. But let's get to the whiskey, since we're 7.5 minutes in, and this is not sipping and talking, this is a review. I immediately get eucalyptus, which to me signifies a lot of wheat. Other people, they say it's a softer, sweeter, gentler whiskey. I cannot detect that. But you put enough wheat in there, and I've especially found it true of Oregon Spirit juice, not just this, but their wheat whiskey and their bourbon. I get eucalyptus. It's like sniffing Vicks Vapor Rub or a eucalyptus cough drop. And that really is all I ever get on the nose of this stuff. And it's pleasant. By the way, what's the proof on this puppy? This is 90 proof. It says on the label, distilled from grain. By definition, all whiskey is distilled from grain. That is totally unnecessary. Does it have an age statement? Aged 4 years up here on the neck. So that's one thing I like about Oregon Spirit. I don't know why, unless they really can't get their desired flavor profile without mixing and matching and having all different age whiskeys in the bottle. Unless that, I don't know why distilleries don't ubiquitously put an age statement on the bottle. I don't know why they don't release their mash bills. Some, and Buffalo Trace is notorious for this, are so secretive with their mash bills that you'd think it was a national security matter. I can't talk tonight. It's only 10:18. Why am I stumbling and stammering? Beats the living daylights out of me. But you can have the exact proportions of grain in the mash bill, even know exactly which grain it is, and not be able to copy successfully that whiskey, because there are so many other factors that impact the final product. So don't ask me. But there's eucalyptus there. I've said that 3 or 4 times now. And maybe a little honey underneath. Eucalyptus honey does sound like a good cough drop. That's, what's this, let's? It's a habit. Everybody does it. But the thing is, unless you see what this video is, have a bottle of this and grab it to drink with me, which I doubt, it's not let us, it's let me, because I'm the only one doing it. But I'll have me a sip, check out the mouthfeel. And it's a typical 90 proof mouthfeel. It's not watery, but it isn't thick, it isn't creamy, it's just 90 proof whiskey. And I'm not complaining, mind. You know, not everything can be Wild Turkey Rare Breed, which has the thickest mouthfeel of anything I've ever encountered. Of course, this came up tonight, and I realized that I hadn't ever reviewed it on the channel. Of course, because my palate isn't working the way it should. And if I said, I'll do it again when it comes up again, my palate wouldn't work that day either, so might as well go for it. The same nose. Maybe a little woodiness, maybe a little pine needle in there. And pine is something I rarely, if ever, get from rye, but a lot of people do. With my palate not working as I wanted to, I was really giving the whiskey a workout in my mouth. I'm getting the eucalyptus on the palate. I'm getting that little tinge of honey. And that's all I got really on that sip. And normally I get more. You know, the eucalyptus is the dominant note on the nose and on the palate. Even on days when my palate is working at its best. But that's really all I got on that sip. And of course, the first sip I wasn't even looking for flavor, I was checking the mouthfeel. Yeah, I get the eucalyptus, I get the honey, there's a little bit of something minty and piney, just sneaking along, barely discernible underneath it all. And I like this stuff better than it sounds. But as I say, tonight, for whatever reason, my palate is not behaving. The last time I reviewed something for this channel, and I think I've already uploaded it, I tend to try to get my reviews up as soon as I can. But if I remember right, this happened to me the last time I recorded a review, that my palate just malfunctioned. Not a total loss, because then I just have to scrap the whole idea of the video and try it again another time. But just off enough that I can tell it. Let me see what I can get off of the finish here. a blast of eucalyptus. There's an alcohol sting. Then there's that coolness of the eucalyptus, and it's beginning right here and going down to about here, like I've been sucking on a eucalyptus cough drop. The honey's not there on the finish, but there is a woodiness in there, which of course comes from the oak. It's not like generic wood, it's an oaky woodiness, and I don't know any other way to describe it. And I wish I did. I don't like not being able to describe things plainly. And I don't like it when reviewers don't even make the attempt. I love Josh and Aaron from Stuff and Whiskey. But when they, and this is what reminded me of this before I even started the video, when they drink a wheated bourbon, they talk about the wheater funk. They never describe it. Or if they have, it's just been once or twice and it hasn't conveyed any information to me. You know, what's a wheater funk? What's a funk to begin with? To me, funk is music. You know, lakeside. Take a ride on the Fantastic Voyage. You know, come along, pack your bags, get on up and jam, y'all. Come on and ride on the funk, y'all. And no, I'm not a singer. Although I did better there than I thought I would. You're probably sitting there saying, if that's better than he thought, how badly did he think? I sing Sacred Harp when I get the opportunity, which is not every time these days, thanks to my job. But I do okay on the tenor. And Sacred Harp is a form of music designed for people who can't really sing but want to. I'm not going to go into the history of it now. This isn't the time nor the place. Oh yeah, it's from Home Improvement. Tim would sometimes have these construction workers on tool time, and I can't remember the names, but one of them would always come out with something totally inappropriate, and the other one would look at him and say, "This is neither the time nor the place." Well, this ain't the time nor the place for the history of whatever I was, Sacred Harp. But to me, that's funk. That Lakeside thing, Rick James, George Clinton, Parliament Funkadelic. That's funk. And something like that, you can say, well, that's pretty funky. You know, man, that car looks funky. And in that context, it can have something of a negative connotation. But what's a wheater funk? What is a funk at all when it comes to whiskey? Nobody ever defines it, and if they do, it seems to mean whatever it means to that person at that time. Well, a term that means anything doesn't mean anything. If it can mean anything at all, it really has no meaning. It's like, ooga booga. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means an avocado. It does? That boy over there told me it means shut up and go away. Doesn't mean anything. Just noise. So what a wheater funk is, I don't know. Whether it's here, I don't know. All I know is I like this whiskey better than it has sounded thus far as I've evaluated it. On that sip, the honey came in strong. There was some brown sugar following after, and I didn't really get the eucalyptus till I swallowed, and then blam, from here on back it just blasted and faded. And that's something about drinking whiskey. If you're a beginner, you'll want to keep this in mind. One, as I've already indicated, your palate isn't always the same. It can change. Second, even during the course of a single glass, you can get different things. Your palate can alter. The whiskey can alter. The longer it's out exposed to air, the more it can change. And in the bottle, the cork does not provide anywhere near a perfect seal. A perfect seal would exclude all air, and then as the air pressure outside changed, it might make it impossible to pull the cork, or the air pressure inside. You know, you have the cork in. If there's a perfect seal and the bottle gets cold, the air inside contracts, there's lower pressure, and the air outside is pushing down on the cork, not a vacuum, but the lower pressure inside sucking on the cork, and you'd have a devil of a time getting it out. But because it's not a perfect seal, air flows in and out. And so that'll change the whiskey over time. It's not an extremely rapid process. You can have a bottle of whiskey open for years, and it'll change, but it won't be dramatic unless you take the first glass and the last glass and compare them. And Josh and Aaron did that one time on Stuff and Whiskey. And they could tell the two were related, but they thought they were two different whiskeys from the same distiller, when in fact they were the first and last glass from the bottle. So whiskey does change in the bottle. It changes in the glass as it interacts with the air. Your palate can change from day to day, sometimes from minute to minute. For me, almost everything I eat will wreck my palate until a couple of hours have passed and it's had time to clear off. But this is better whiskey than my palate tonight is indicating. And I'm at 23 minutes. I need to cut this off. That sip also gave me the sweetness rather than the eucalyptus. Then when I swallowed, the eucalyptus went from front to back to the top of my throat. And then a sweetness just is even now sitting and resting on my tongue. So maybe my palate's beginning to get back to normal. But this is a better whiskey than it sounds like from this review. If you can find it, I recommend it. If it's in a store that will let you sample it, yes, I would. It is not a standard rye, nowhere near close. It's not even like a bourbon drinker's rye. It is something absolutely unique. And of course that is redundant. Unique by its nature is a superlative. One of a kind. You cannot have two things that are one of that kind. So absolutely unique is an error. But I fall into error sometimes. But this is a unique whiskey. If you're looking for a rye, this might not be what you're after. This is more like a wheat whiskey than a rye, even though by definition it is a majority of rye. But with those caveats in place, I like this stuff. Once I'd tried this bottle, I went back and got another one, and it's awaiting in my desk for when this one runs out. Will I buy a third? I don't know. It does begin to pall after a little bit because that eucalyptus from the wheat is so dominant. And I wish they had, whatever their proportions, I wish they had used a little less wheat, a little more rye. But it is good. I like it. You might or might not, I don't know, but I do recommend it. On that note, I don't know if there are any particularly Oregon expressions. I don't know if there are any particularly Texas expressions for when you do this. But, well, I'm wearing a Dale Earnhardt hat. I don't know if you noticed. Dale Earnhardt was from North Carolina and looked a lot like Mark Rogers, where Mark Rogers looks a lot like him. Mark Rogers from Moonshiners. This is not bringing anything to mind, so I'm just going to say cheers.